Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just here at the Vancouver Convention Centre wrapping up what has been 2 weeks of the Union of BC Municipalities annual conference where representatives from communities across BC, local government leaders, regional directors come together to raise issues of concern with each other and also, of course, with the provincial government. It's always a productive time for local government. It's always a productive time for the provincial government as well, because we're able to compare notes, look at where the challenges are, and find common purpose and ways to bring forward positive solutions. So I want to lift my hands to Brian Frankel, the outgoing president of UBCM, and wish him all the best as he goes back to regular duties on his Vanderhoof Council, and all the best to the incoming leadership as they plot a course for municipalities right across British Columbia. And with that, I'll ask Lindsay to go from here.
Thanks, everybody. As a reminder to everybody on the phone line, please press *1 to enter the queue. First question today is from Binder Sajjan, CTV.
Hi, Premier. I know in your remarks there you mentioned your conversation with Senior Jason Penning. Just wondering how that conversation went, if there's any other assistance that you think BC could provide Alberta, and also if you can talk a little bit about what safeguards are in place here in BC, where we've seen cases rising to make sure we don't follow in Alberta's footsteps.
Yeah, well, we had Premier Kenney and I have been colleagues for, well, I've been in this job for 4 years. I think he's been in the Alberta seat for the past 2 years. I've taken over the leadership of the Council of Federations, so I've been canvassing premiers across the country on a range of issues. But of course, critical for our discussions this morning, Premier Kenney and I were getting a sense from him on what the challenges are he and Albertans face as the fourth wave hits particularly hard in Alberta. Minister Dix has spoken with his opposite number. We have staff engaged all the time between our two jurisdictions, finding ways to ensure that healthcare services can be delivered in the most effective way to those who need them. The challenges in Alberta right now are stark. Premier Kenney and I both agreed that the way forward for Alberta and for British Columbia, and indeed all of Canada, is to increase our vaccination rates. BC's numbers are very good, significantly higher than Alberta's, but on border communities in the Peace Country, the Columbia Valley, and through the Rockies, our immunization rate is much lower than in other parts of British Columbia. So those interface communities between Alberta and British Columbia are particularly at risk. We've seen significant numbers of cases as a result of lack of immunizations in those communities. The same can be said in Alberta. In fact, the rural challenges for Albertans are even graver than they are here in British Columbia. So on a comparative basis, of course, we're in much better shape here in British Columbia, but that doesn't mean we're not going to continue to be vigilant, continue to encourage people to get vaccines. That's the safest, most effective way to protect yourself, your family, and your loved ones, and your community, of course. And that's the course I believe that Premier Kenney will be following as well. But the situation is quite serious there. He acknowledged that, of course, in addresses to the Alberta public in the past couple of days. And we stand ready to assist where we can, when we can. But we have to also maintain our ICU capacity at a level that will allow us to continue to have surgeries. We've had to suspend some surgeries as a result of COVID cases in our ICUs, but Minister Dix and Dr. Henry are managing all of that. We'll have more to say on the ICU capacity issue at their briefing next week.
Binder, do you have a follow-up?
I do. I'm Senior, you were at an event yesterday ahead of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. It is, of course, a federally recognized holiday. Are you thinking of having this holiday provincially? And if not, I'm just wondering, would it serve to show First Nations just how serious BC is when it comes to reconciliation to have a provincially recognized holiday?
Yeah, we're in the final stages of making an announcement on our plans for September 30th. I think they will be consistent with the thrust of my government since we were sworn in. Reconciliation, the rights of Indigenous peoples, the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission were all of the mandate letters for every minister of my government. We have demonstrated that commitment in word and in deed, and the symbolism of September 30th as National Orange Shirt Day, but to become National Reconciliation Day is something that I support, but we'll have a formal announcement on that in the days ahead. And I want to just say thank you for highlighting the event yesterday. It was profoundly moving to be with very, very strong and committed Indigenous women, an artist, a community leader, Chief Casimir from Tecumseh Secwepemc territory, where the revelations of unmarked graves were made known to all of us back in May. Always known by Indigenous communities that children did not come home. To have provincial, national, and indeed international recognition of this profound black mark on Canadian history is something that I believe we need to embrace, acknowledge, and be better people and a better community going forward. And I think yesterday was a great step forward. I want to commend the BC Lions for their leadership in this regard.
Next question is from Richard Zussman, Global News.
Hello, my name is Kathy Sling from Independent Media. There have been over 1,000 arrests at Ferry Creek to stop old-growth logging from the Teal Jones cartel.
Just hang on 2
and
seconds,
this government
Richard,
keeps
please.
ignoring this issue. How many more arrests are needed to stop this madness?
Well, I don't know who you are. I don't know.
It sounded like a recording.
Yeah.
Okay, go.
It was
Strange.
a bot. Was that a bot? Did we just get?
I think it might have been a bot.
Okay.
Did we get hacked?
Go ahead, Richard.
I am not a bot. I'm pretty sure you know who I am.
I do.
We've met once or twice.
I do.
There's a restaurant in Hope that is saying they're not going to be checking people's vaccination cards. There are a few others in the province who are seeing this as well. We're a week into this. What is the province doing to enforce the rules around the vaccine card? And are you worried that those that are following the rules will be disadvantaged to those that are not because of some of the costs and other things associated with getting the vaccine card set up?
Well, firstly, we've been very clear that any additional costs, we will do our best to keep those industries, whether it be gyms, restaurants, venues, entertainment venues, assist them in implementing the vaccine card. 2.7 million British Columbians have on their own initiative downloaded vaccine cards to participate in a program that they support. Are there those in the community that feel differently? There is, but it is a decidedly small minority, and I believe it's imperative for all of us who are frustrated and angry and tired of COVID-19 to have an opportunity to gather, to participate in their community activities. These are non-essential activities, confident that the people around them have made the same sacrifices, taken the same steps to protect themselves and those around them. We have had for the entire period of COVID a working group on enforcement, bylaw officers, conservation officers, WorkSafe personnel, and others. Minister Farnworth oversees that. We've been working on trying to have a very soft touch on enforcement. We have not made this about cracking down. We've made this about following the lead of the public. And the public wants confidence that when they go out to these non-essential activities, they will be doing so with people of like mind, people who have taken the steps to protect themselves. This is not a partisan question. Liberals, Conservatives, Greens, New Democrats are getting vaccinated, and they want to gather together, and I think that's a good thing. Minister Farnworth is going to have more to say on enforcement later today, so I'll leave it to him to talk about the details. But I appreciate a new program will be rocky to start. There will be some bumps along the way. I've used my vaccine card 4 times in the past 24 hours seamlessly without incident, and I have not, I've had some with readers, some that have just used a visual scan. The objective here is to give a sense of comfort to those who are engaging in non-essential activities, and I believe we'll be able to achieve that, just as they are now going to be doing in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec, and I'm confident that the Maritimes is not too far behind.
Follow-up, Richard?
Election day on Monday. You signed a few important agreements with the federal government right before the election. One on child care, one on transit. Should British Columbians be worried if there's a change in government that those deals go away? And do you believe that those who voted for you provincially may be better served voting Liberal than NDP in order to protect some of this at a federal level.
Well, I voted in the advanced polls, which I've been doing for a long, long time now. It's easier, less crowds, less lineups. I voted for Alistair McGregor, as I did in the last election. I've made no secret of that. So my local MP, I hope, will be re-elected. With respect to how other Canadians should vote, other British Columbians should vote, that's entirely up to them. My responsibility as leader of the Government of British Columbia is to work with whoever is running the Government of Canada. And the initiatives that you referenced, whether it be SkyTrain from Surrey through to Langley, whether it be $10 a day childcare, were initiatives that we were already doing. We were grateful to hear that the government of the day was prepared to support those, but I'm confident whoever is in power in Ottawa come Tuesday morning will hear from me why these initiatives are important to British Columbians and why whoever the government is should get behind those in the interest of providing the services and the transportation needs and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, all of the benefits that would flow from expanding SkyTrain and providing affordable, accessible, quality childcare are benefits that, regardless of what your political stripe is, that's what people in British Columbia are demanding, and that's what the national government should deliver.
Next question is from Andrew McLeod, the Tyee.
Yeah, hi, Premier. Yesterday, the ombudsperson put out a report about a cabinet maker, a guy named Mr. Snyder, who had a bad accident in the workplace. He was off work for a while, then WorkSafe forced him back before he was ready, and he had another much worse accident. Both WorkSafe and the government expressed sympathy, but neither, well, WorkSafe wasn't able to offer a payment to him, and the government refused. I wonder, what would you say to Mr. Snyder?
Well, I've certainly read executive summaries of Mr. Chalk's review. It is an issue that predates my government, but of course it is before us for deliberation. Cabinet has not yet reviewed the report. I didn't know it was public, Andrew, but what I do know is that it's a very tragic outcome for Mr. Snyder, and we're looking at it from a cabinet perspective, which is unusual in these instances, but that's the process. Mr. Chalk, I think, would be better to ask about his processes and how we got here, but we'll have more to say on that once all of Cabinet's had an opportunity to review the issue, and we'll make some comments at that time.
Follow-up, Andrew?
Yes, please. It relates to something your government's been working on for a while. I'm thinking back to the Paterson report and the recommendations to make the system more worker-centered. I'm wondering if you're happy with the, what progress there's been there and why that's been delayed.
Well, we have been, in the midst of a global pandemic, we have been working on issues that were unresolved over a long period of time. For example, paid sick leave, making sure that there were more employment standards officers to make sure that the Employment Standards Act is being enforced across BC, to make sure that WorkSafe BC is more worker-centric. The Paterson report, there was two other reports that were commissioned during our first term, and Minister Harry Bains is dealing with all of those, distilling them down in a way that will be explainable to the public, workers who depend on WorkSafe, to know that they have someone at their back when they go to work, and also for employers who the grand agreement on employment or workers' compensation was to avoid litigation and find a way to protect workers, protect businesses, and make sure that people came home safely at the end of every day. So we have done a great deal. Minister Bains is distilling the large amount of information we've collected through the various investigations that we've asked for. And Mr. Chalk's report, as I say, I've only just seen the executive summary recently. I didn't realize that it was going to become public. We'll certainly have more to say, Andrew, when we've had a chance to digest what the Ombudsman has discovered, looking more closely at the circumstances around the decisions that were made by WorkSafe. But I'm not in a position to comment on that now. But I will say that this has been a priority for us, and we want to make sure that we do not disrupt what has historically been a delicate balance, but making absolutely sure that at the center of all of this are working people. That means finding a way forward that meets the needs of everybody, and that's been our objective, and Minister Bains has been tasked with making sure that happens.
Next question is from Lisa Houston, News 1130.
there, Premier. We have a story running about BC ferries that passenger frustrated masks are being enforced. The union saying it's really hard to enforce it, and I think it sort of speaks to a challenge many are having. We also talked to a nonprofit gym that is being sued over requiring proof of vaccine, and so, you know, even though that will get tossed, it's going to cost them money before it gets to that point. So I'm wondering, what is the province going to do? What can you do to assist with these additional and perhaps unforeseen costs and challenges because of the vaccine passport?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. And you hit upon a couple of examples, and there are many, many more, and more will come in the days and weeks ahead. But our objective is clear and transparent, and that is to protect the health and well-being of British Columbians. Dr. Henry has demonstrated extraordinary leadership over the past 19, 20 months to ensure that we protected people, did not have a surge in our acute care system, and kept our economy going to the point where we've had positive economic outcomes as a result of those initiatives. So on the bumps along the way, I am committed to making sure that the mask mandate, as directed by the public health officer, is enforced. And these are not extraordinary requests for citizens to just abide by simple rules to protect the people around you. And again, Minister Farnworth will be the one you should best ask that question to. He's making himself available later in the day. BC Ferry's employees, again, the reception and the hospitality folks at the front door of restaurants should not be abused by people who have a different point of view. But they are a distinct minority, and as regrettable as it is that those who disagree with 2.7 million British Columbians and counting should take it up with their elected representatives, not with the people who are trying to make a living, trying to provide services for people. And again, the vast majority of people are quite comfortable with these regulations for as limited a time as we can possibly have them. And to reduce the amount of time we have to live under these circumstances, it can be addressed simply by getting a vaccination and protecting yourself, your family, and your community.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
I do, and you were asked this a bit in the UBCM. Dr. Henry yesterday was talking about the heat dome and it being the worst health event that Canada's had in history. And wondering what the province is going to do to ensure, you know, that the number of deaths that we've had don't happen again, and safeguards being put in place, and will there be a promise to ensure that future buildings have air conditioning?
It was unprecedented, extraordinary time. In fact, we've been in extraordinary times. Certainly in the 4 years I've had the honor and privilege of being Premier, it seems every week is another extraordinary, first, never happened before circumstance. And certainly the work of the Coroner's Office, public health officials, communities, we need to prepare for now the worst case scenario when it comes to increasing temperatures in our moderate temperate rainforest. We do need to talk with developers. We need to talk to municipal councils about how we can ensure that new builds have appropriate technologies in place to make sure that it's not too hot and it's not too cold. But for existing builds, that's a bigger challenge. We clearly have to be better prepared to invite the public to common places. Again, during a global pandemic, difficult to do. To find cooling centers to ensure that our 911 capacity is as good as it can be. Minister Dix has been making significant investments, hiring more paramedics, hiring more frontline workers to address these challenges. But and as you know, Lisa, the evidence is a coming together of a series of unfortunate circumstances. A global pandemic prevented us from ensuring that we could get public spaces opened up for cooling centers. The challenges of, well, it's not going to be that hot, so it never gets that hot in British Columbia. All of these things conspired to have absolutely tragic outcomes for individuals and for families. We have to learn from that. The work of the coroner, the work of public health, and now the work of communities will put us in a place to be better prepared for next summer and the summers ahead. But, 4 fire seasons, 2017, 2018, and 2021, led to 3.1 million hectares of BC forests evaporating into smoke and dust. And the consequences of that are a direct result of climate change. The heat dome is a direct result of climate change. We need to make sure that we're coming at this from a multitude of directions to address the challenges on the land base, within buildings, and of course in communities. big challenge, but we have to be up for it, and it's going to need collaboration. I was very, very pleased to hear questions from UBCM delegates about how they could work with other orders of government to protect their citizens, and that's the only way forward.
Next question is from Nick Wells, Canadian Press.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I'm just curious if you're able to expand on the discussions you've had with your American counterparts regarding the recent bills proposed by Alaskan elected officials about cruise ships, mainly that Alaskan-bound cruise ships will be able to skip BC ports if they so desire. So yeah, I'm curious if you can kind of give an update on the discussions that have been held.
Sure. Well, thanks for that. I have not spoken to Senator Murkowski on this round. I've never spoken to Congressman Young, both Republicans in a Democrat-controlled Congress. We've been in touch with the Canadian ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Hillman. We worked with her to ensure that the congressional delegations understood the importance to British Columbia and to the relationships between Canada and the United States, that passage not be confined to Seattle and Alaska, but indeed the cruise ship industry is very anxious to continue to have BC ports as destinations for their marquee packages that they're selling internationally. Ambassador Hillman is going to report back to me on Monday about what she's learned about the likelihood of success or failure of the initiatives that are being sponsored by the Alaska delegation. I do know that when I get the opportunity to speak to the incoming Prime Minister, the first order of business is going to be the importance of having the United States administration recognize that we have had a collaborative relationship with our neighbors, whether they be in Alaska or Washington and Idaho and a little bit of Montana, for a long, long time. And my first conversation with Senator Murkowski, she talked to me about the importance of Prince Rupert in her childhood as a young woman leaving Alaska to go to the continental United States or go to the south of the 49th. She could not get there without going through Prince Rupert. So she fully understands the relationship between our two jurisdictions, how important it is to keep that open. And I'm confident that the incoming federal government will put this high on their agenda, and I'm going to insist that they do so.
Follow up, Nick?
No, that's it for me. Thanks.
Next question is from Victor Kaiser, Radio NL.
Hi, Premier. Thanks for doing this. I just wanted to talk to you briefly about the situation at Royal Inland Hospital in Kamloops. I'm sure you're well aware of the staffing crisis we've had. We've had a death in the hospital, too, while someone was waiting for care. We've had the several local politicians, both the MLAs as well, calling on both you and Minister Dix to take some accountability for the staffing situation that is there or, at the hospital. Wondering what you have to say to some of those calls from politicians, both municipally and provincially, asking for people to step up and support the hospital that seems to be in a crisis.
Well, certainly we have significant healthcare challenges across the province. COVID-19 is creating difficulties in our acute care facilities because unvaccinated British Columbians are contracting COVID-19. That's leading to increased hospitalizations, increase in strain and stress on frontline workers who have been working double shifts and sometimes triple shifts for months and months and months. Certainly, we're fully accountable for the delivery of healthcare services as the government of British Columbia. But we have to have a long-term view here, and I'm certain that the mayor, I can't speak for the wisdom of the local MLAs, but I certainly know the mayor and council understands that we need to make sure we're encouraging more people to come into healthcare. That means creating more spaces in our post-secondary institutions, getting people into the system, and encouraging those to stay who may be at the point of exhaustion as a result of what we've had to go through over the past number of years. And of course, my heart goes out to the families that are affected by the challenges in healthcare, but I think the vast majority of British Columbians understand, even if they've been adversely affected by COVID, that collectively we all have to hang together. We all have to keep our eye on the ball, which is supporting those who are putting their lives on the line to keep us well in our acute care system. Our frontline workers, they're the people that have been keeping us safe. And we need to acknowledge that. We need to be grateful for that. And our job, Minister Dix and I, is to make sure that the resources are in place to bring more people on as quickly as we possibly can. That's been a challenge because of the issues that we inherited. And I don't want to belabor this point, but the challenges in our long-term care facilities were a direct result of underfunding and, quite frankly, disregarding the value of healthcare workers in the early part of this century. And we've been playing catch-up as a province through successive governments. And what brought it graphically home for all of us was a global pandemic. We do not have enough people in place. We have not respected those workers over decades, and it's not going to be fixed in a weekend. It's going to be fixed over time, and we're committed to doing that.
Victor, do you have a follow-up?
I do, yes. Kind of on that lines, Premier, you mentioned more spaces at TRU. We've heard, maybe it's not going as quickly as it perhaps should have been to get maybe more nurses trained off. Of course, now that you have the vaccine mandate as well, there's concerns that maybe some nurses would just say, that's it, I'm done, because they do not want to get the vaccine. So, I'm not saying it can be fixed, of course, in a weekend, but what can be done maybe more right now if people need care to prevent something like what happened with the 70-year-old woman who died while waiting for care at the hospital here in Kamloops?
Well, it was our government that put nursing spaces at TRU. It wasn't the government of Member Stone or Member Millibar. So it's not about that, though, but I think it's important before you start criticizing people to be accountable for your own actions. And we all know that we need to have more people in healthcare. Delivering services through the pandemic has made that abundantly clear. We have a deficit in a whole range of areas. Every component of our economy, every sector is experiencing labor shortages right now. There's not a person that I talk to in a day from industry, from organized labor, who doesn't say we don't have enough people. And it is critical that we recruit, retain, and value healthcare workers going forward. And that means creating more spaces than we've already done and making sure that the compensation levels are sufficient to encourage people to take those career choices. From care aides all the way up to brain surgeons, we need to have people in our system to deliver those services.
We have time for a couple more questions. Albert Chu, Fairchild.
Premier, in the East Vancouver Island and southern east of BC interior, they have a drought situation. I'm just wondering if the government has any idea of handling the situation if those areas are scarce of water. Will the government initiate any plan for the future to secure those water sources and to secure those ecosystems?
Okay, thank you for that, Albert. And it's always to talk about a drought when the rain is coming down in buckets is easy to dismiss, but you're absolutely right, and it's not rain events for a day or two. What we need to see to deal with drought in the interior particularly, but also in other parts of British Columbia, is to see an increase in snowpack. It's the snow that we get in winter months that we hope will melt gradually to avoid floods, but to make sure there's water for irrigation, water for all of the other essentials of life. These are critical challenges, and local government has a role to play, and we've been talking about that, our ministers and local representatives this past week here at UBCM. What can we do to fortify dams? What can we do to dams to hold water for agriculture, for example? What can we do to make sure that restrictions are put in place early in a season so that people understand that they have to moderate how much water they use for domestic purposes to ensure that we can spread that around over a longer period of time. In my community, in southern Vancouver Island, the Souk Reservoir, the water levels were increased a few years ago because of concerns about drought, and that was back coming on now 15 years ago. We need to make those decisions today. We need to make sure the resources are in place today so that we can prepare for the challenges of climate change that we know are going to be with us in the years ahead. So we need to better prepare on the land base, and that's, again, a collaboration. I was very heartened to hear the outgoing leadership and the incoming leadership of UBCM focused on how can we collaborate, how can we make sure that all orders of government, including the federal government, and perhaps even most critically, the federal government, understand and recognize that we've got to stop thinking in terms of election cycles and start thinking in terms of what ecosystems need over the long term. That's the thinking, that's the language that's being used here in British Columbia. I hope to bring that thinking and language to the incoming federal government as well.
Follow-up, Albert?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, okay, we have last question today. Tanya Fletcher, CBC.
Hi, Premier. I have a UBCM-related question from Justin McElroy, first of all. He says one municipality that's been through a lot, of course, is Lytton. And it's been nearly 3 months since most of the town burned down, and an increasing number of residents are expressing frustration with not being allowed to see their properties, and no details yet on when interim housing might be on the land. So what do you say to them?
Well, I can absolutely understand their frustration, and the challenge, of course, is that the fire was so intense, and the toxins that have been released into the environment where the town site was are significant. And we want to make sure that as people return to the community, they're doing so confident that their health is not going to be compromised, as well as their home and belongings. We're working with the Fraser Basin Council to help facilitate the best way forward to get temporary housing in place. That's well underway, but we need to make sure that the town site is a safe place to go. Indigenous communities are working very collaboratively with us and with non-Indigenous leadership in the community to start talking about how we build back better, as a term that we've heard a lot of lately. But a community like Lytton that has such a rich history can now be a symbol and a beacon for how we develop a community for the future, which will include intense weather, which will include challenges at the confluence of the Thompson and the Fraser. Lytton is an extraordinary place that had and does have extraordinary people that are ready to rebuild. We need to be there for them. I understand their frustration, but we need to make sure that the town site is safe before we move people back in. A lot of work is being done behind the scenes. We have cross-ministry teams. We're working and bringing in expertise, shoring up the staff at the township. The village staff are new. We've got experienced people who have come out of retirement to help. The community is focused on getting back better. I met a firefighter in Lillooet from Lytton whose house was gone. And he told me how he felt about that. He told me about what we could have done better leading up to that. And then months later, I met him in Vernon, still out there fighting fires, knowing that his home was gone. And I took great comfort from the resilience of Scott as a courageous British Columbian who, despite having experienced an extraordinary loss, was still focused on making sure that other people didn't experience that as well. And it's that type of spirit, I believe, that exists in Lytton and will be there as we rebuild the community to be better than it was before, or at least different than it was before, better prepared for the changing environment that we live in.
Tanya, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. And I just wanted to go back to the federal election and the child care deal signed with the Liberals before the campaign. Have you secured similar assurances as like Quebec has from the Conservatives that would ensure Erin O'Toole would similarly honor BC side of the bilateral agreement? And part two to that, child care advocates here say no matter who wins, they'll still expect you to deliver $10 a day daycare in BC in 5 years, especially given the improved fiscal outlook in last week's budget update. So will you commit to that regardless of who forms government in Ottawa?
We have always been committed to $10 a day child care. It was a foundational part of our election campaign in 2017. We started down that road. We recommitted in 2020, but we did so with the assurance that we would continue to work with the federal government to be full participants in what should be a national program. It wasn't just British Columbia and Quebec who signed agreements with the outgoing government. I think 7 jurisdictions across the country did so. I've mentioned that I'm now chairing the Council of the Federation, so I have a broader obligation for an incoming government to make sure that not just the agreements that British Columbia reached, but agreements that other provinces reached are honored by whoever the government is. It's not for me to engage in negotiations with political parties during election campaigns, but I have been watching very closely what the various leaders have had to say on projects that will have an impact on British Columbia. And I'm confident that regardless of the outcome on Monday, well, in fact, I know that I and my team will be aggressively talking to the governments of Canada about delivering on the services that are so important to people here in BC, commitments that have been made in the past and commitments that must be fulfilled in the future.
That's all the time we have. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.